Well, this is our last look at the book of Ruth. If we can get my slides up, guys, that would be great. Oh, no, not that one. No. There we go, thank you. So, the place we left the story last time, if you were here, was a little bit like this. Oh, isn't that nice? It took me ages to get that. Anyway, so the end of the story basically last time was this. He said yes. Lovely. So Ruth asked Boaz to marry her, to rescue her and Naomi, her mother-in-law, from poverty. And if you remember, if you were here last time, it was the duty in those days of the close family to buy out, basically, someone who was in poverty. Rather than leave Ruth and Naomi on the streets, it was the relatives' duty to buy whatever assets they had. Now you might ask the question, well, is that really love? Is this really a love relationship? Well, I would argue, yes, it is. It's absolutely love, because it's all about actions rather than just warm, fuzzy feelings, which is what love is really all about, especially in the Bible. So now the story continues, and Ruth makes her way under the cover of darkness, because you remember chapter 3 occurs at night time. Under the cover of darkness, very early dawn, she goes and tells Naomi the great news that he's agreed to marry me. And if you remember, there was a slight problem with them getting married, a little twist in the plot, that there's this guy. We saw him in chapter 3, verse 12. Boaz sort of says, yeah, I will marry you, but there's a little problem we've got to sort out first, because it turns out that Boaz is not the only close relative. There's someone who's actually a closer relative. And I think it's a short story, okay? So we're meant to think, oh, right, does that mean the deal's off then? You know, what happens now? This is like a dramatic moment. I don't know if you feel that. You should. Okay, it's meant to be a dramatic moment in the story. And, it seems like the Lord has led them this far, and now to fall at the last hurdle. But this story, chapter 4, really occurs in two scenes. There's a long scene and there's a short scene with a little bit in between. So the first scene is this. Chapter 4, verse 1 to 12, you've got Boaz and this guy who are going to sort it all out. Okay? So it says, meanwhile, chapter 4, verse 1, meanwhile, so while Ruth is going to tell Naomi the good news, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there. That's the place where all the legal stuff gets sorted out at the town gate. Just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned, that guy, came along. That's a nice little coincidence, isn't it? There's a lot of coincidences in the book of Ruth, that things that just happen at the right time, in the right place, the right people at the right. We'll come back to that in a bit. So Boaz calls him over and says, "Come and sit down. We need to chat." And in the NIV, he calls him friend. "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." A literal translation would be Mr. So-and-so. This guy doesn't get a name. There's probably different reasons for that. But he calls over Mr. So-and-so. And calls over 10 of the elders of the town as well, as witnesses, because they're going to do business. They're going to do a legal transaction here. So they need some witnesses. And you see, it's a very male picture, isn't it? So you've got Boaz, you've got Mr. So-and-so, who doesn't get a name, and you've got 10 male witnesses there. It's like you break open the brandy and cigars. It's that kind of picture. And in verse 3, Boaz starts to explain what's going on. So he says, Naomi's selling her land, because she's absolutely dirt poor, in abject poverty. She needs the cash. Your responsibility, Mr. So-and-so, Mr. X, your responsibility is to buy her out if you can afford it. Because she's a relative. We need to try and stay together. Try and keep it in the family, to support each other. And if you don't do it, he says, I will, Boaz says. And Mr. So-and-so says, okay, I'll buy it. You think, oh no, don't buy it. That's all going wrong. But you can see why he's keen, because if you think about it, there's a nice bit of land. There's no male heirs in the whole of Ruth and Naomi's family, which means that he's going to buy this bit of land for not a lot of money, and it becomes part of his estate, you see? And even when the year of Jubilee comes along and everything gets reset, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, there's no one to give it back to. So it's going to remain in his family. So this is like really, really low-risk transaction, okay? But then Boaz just drops in. I'm just explaining the story a little bit. So then Boaz drops in. By the way, the plot of land also comes with a woman. It also comes with Ruth, this young foreign widow. It's like a package. And suddenly, he's not so keen. And you think, well, why? That sounds like an even better deal, if you're into that kind of thing. See, this is the problem. This is the problem. If he's also got to marry Ruth, one day Ruth might have a son, and that son would then be the rightful heir to that bit of land. So there's a whole load of responsibility looking after this woman and her mother-in-law, okay? And as soon as they have a baby, it's all gone. So he's looked after them for years and years and years, and then it's no net benefit. It's just costing him money. It's a drain on his resources. That's how he sees it. When it was just a bit of land, great. Now it involves caring for a family. That's just too much hassle. That's just too much hassle. And you get this, right, okay. And you get this sort of weird cultural thing with exchanging sandals. I don't know if you registered that when Sarah was reading it. So to confirm a transaction in Israel at that time, you would take your shoe off and swap it with the guy you were doing the deal with, which sounds really weird to us, doesn't it? I guess they must have all worn the same shoes, otherwise you'd be going around with non-matching shoes forevermore. I don't really know. But I always think we have to be very careful when it comes to critiquing other people's culture, because actually in our culture, if you're British, spit on your hand, shake hands with someone, that's how you do a business deal. In maybe a few years ago. You know, that's it. Yeah, how much more weird is that? That's just as weird as exchanging shoes, surely. Anyway, so here we are. We've got this bit part character, Mr. So-and-so, who shows commitment initially, but he quickly backs off when he sees the real, true cost of that commitment. That doing the right thing is going to be costly, and it's going to lead to uncertainty. I wonder, does that remind you of anyone else in the story? You may have seen it flash on the screen. Isn't that exactly what Orpah did? Remember right back in chapter 1? It's the beauty of a short story, you see. It all interconnects. It's a really clever story. So Orpah, right back in chapter 1, when Naomi decided to go go back to Bethlehem from Moab, there were three of them, Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah. And they set out on the road that would lead them back. If you remember that, chapter 1, verse 7. Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah, go back to Moab. You know, if you want to have a life, don't come with me. Don't go back to Moab. Live there. If you want to have kids, if you want to have a family, if you want to marry again, go back. And Orpah sees the cost of the commitment and says, you know what? Yeah, forget it, and turns back. Mr. So-and-so sees the cost of the commitment and turns back. I'll commit this much and no further. While I can see the immediate benefit, great. But you know what? If God asks me to do something I don't like, if God asks me to do something that I'm not going to see immediate benefit from, walk away. That's Orpah. That's Mr. So-and-so. I wonder if that's sometimes us. You know, how many of us have been in exactly that place where you say, Lord, okay, I'm follow you. I'm willing to follow you. I'll go this far, but no further. If you ask me to do that, then the deal's off. I can't do that. I don't mind quitting that, but I'm never going to let go of that. That thing is too precious for me. while I'm getting something good out of it, let's go with that. If Jesus is going to bring me peace with God, with not a lot of commitment on my part, great, I'll take Jesus, brilliant. But when Jesus says things like this, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. That's hard, isn't it? I don't know how many times I've preached on this verse, many, many times. To take up your cross, what does that mean? That means to take your own method of execution. What is it saying? Jesus is saying you've got to kill self. To deny yourself, to kill you in this whole relationship. To kill your desires, your wants, your ambitions, your dreams, and follow Jesus and Jesus alone. When Mr. So-and-so or Orpah heard that kind of thing, they ran a mile. And many people do. Many people did to Jesus as well. But Jesus says this as well, whoever wants to save their life will lose it. And whoever wants to lose their life for me will save it. If you want a safe life, if you want to preserve everything you want and save your life, sure, that's your choice. But you'll lose it for eternity, Jesus says. But if you lose your life for Jesus, I don't mean die for him necessarily, but lose your life, you being in control, you holding the steering wheel. If you're prepared to let go of the steering wheel and let him drive the car, then you save your life forever. You save your life forever. It struck me that both Orpah and Mr. So-and-so made really logical choices. Sensible choices. Reasonable choices, but not kingdom choices. Not kingdom choices. See, the Lord asks us to follow without seeing. That's what faith is sometimes, isn't it? When God asks you to do something that is not the most obvious thing, that is not the logical thing to do, but the thing that is right, the thing that he calls you to do. Sometimes you just can't